Hey everyone, hope you've had a nice Halloween and maybe perhaps you've dressed up as today's character. Now we're getting into something good. I've been wanting to talk about a Spider-Man game for a while, and now seems the perfect time to do it with the new one exclusively for the PlayStation 4. And after feeling miserable playing Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Spider-Man helped me act positively again.
And I'm very glad this turned out great too, because I was a little worried about it as the release date was getting closer and closer, but things did still seem promising. It was going to mix together exploring New York from previous Spider-Man games, mostly Spider-Man 2, and a similar combat system to the Batman Arkham games. Though the latter was one of the main things that had me concerned. I thought it was just going to be a blatant copy of Batman, and while it does borrow a few elements from the Arkham games and a number of stuff from a lot of open world sandbox games these days, I personally think Spider-Man does just enough to stick out.
Usually whenever someone talks about a good Spider-Man game, they're either referring to the Spider-Man 2 game based on the second Tobey Maguire movie, or the 2000 game for the 5th generation of consoles that even got its own PlayStation sequel, which wasn't as good, but it could still be a fun time. Spider-Man for the PS4 mainly focuses on the open world nature that started with Spider-Man 2. As in the movie-based game, not this one that's called Spider-Man 2 but has Enter Electro as the subheading, but forget it.
There's a reason anyway that Marvel's Spider-Man has currently become the fastest selling PlayStation game of all time, selling 3.1 million copies in just 3 days, and this is all thanks to Insomniac Games, a developer I'm very familiar with. Now this may shock some people, but I never grew up with Spyro the Dragon. My family never owned a PS1 or a Nintendo 64, so I missed out on a lot of classics. No, my very first console was the PlayStation 2, and that led me to the Ratchet and Clank series, also created by Insomniac. I love these games. They played a large part of my childhood with their cartoony aesthetic and tons of destruction with the amount of cool guns and gadgets, and I still pick them up to this day. If you haven't experienced them yet, then start with the PS4 remake of the first game. It's friggin' amazing. Right, I'm supposed to be talking about Spider-Man. Well, basically, when it comes to games, he's had a better reputation than Batman or Superman, but as time went on for the webhead, the quality of his games started to decline, especially with the Amazing Spider-Man 2, more so I've heard anyway. However, Insomniac's Spider-Man was going to bring him back and fix the mistakes of the other games, and, well, mission accomplished. I wasn't even going to buy it day one initially, but as I was watching my brother play through his copy, I was like, damn it, now I have to get the game. And so I immediately went to pre-order it just in time for the bonuses, which I'll go over later. This would be the point of the video where I'd go over the story, but truth be told, it's actually not a very big deal in the end. It kinda just plays as one really long episode with the baddie of the week, in this case the new villain in town, Mr. Negative, with a few familiar foes added in for good measure like the Kingpin, Shocker, and Screwball. Wait, who's she? Oh, she was only in a few of the comics since 2008. What an odd choice. Well, anyway, that isn't to say nothing happens in the story and no character development is present, because there certainly is. It's been several years since Spider-Man started his career as a superhero, so things are definitely bound to happen in his life. He meets up with Mary Jane fairly early on, and turns out they've broken up for some time and have to try and be civil with each other. Norman Osborn is a corrupt mayor and hires Silver Sable to deliver extreme levels of justice, disconcerting the webhead. Miles Morales has a little side story and not only becomes a part of Peter Parker's life when he helps Aunt May take care of the homeless, but he also gets a few bro moments with Spider-Man, foreshadowing the man he'll eventually become. And perhaps one of the biggest storylines is the friendship between Peter and Otto Octavius, which if you're aware of the Spider-Man storyline, you know exactly how this is gonna play out. I overall wouldn't say the story of Marvel's Spider-Man is the main driving force, but don't take that as a bad thing. Spider-Man's always been rarely heavy on its story. He's had his dark and depressing moments, but they didn't shape the franchise as a whole. All that mattered was who Spider-Man was going to face, what dangerous situation he'd find himself in, and slightly improve Peter Parker and those close to him as characters. It's all meant to be just one big thrill ride with some zaniness and quips.
Oops, guess we're stuck in here for a while. Want to play 20 questions? No? How about we thumb wrestle? Okay, face punch it is.
Whereas something like Batman has to try harder since he takes his work more seriously, like using mystery and deep relationships between characters to keep the audience engaged. The only mystery you have in the PS4 Spider-Man game is the Devil's Breath that could potentially be a viral bioweapon, but there may be more to that than we know. I won't give it away until I'm sure the inevitable sequel brings it up again like what Arkham City did with the Titan virus, so we'll move on to the gameplay, and wow does it feel great. You've got all of the swinging abilities you could pull off in the Spider-Man 2 game, but now with much tighter control and a few added bells and whistles to make you look awesome and simultaneously make swinging so damn exhilarating. And it all gets better when you use the skill tree system similar to the Arkham games, because I think that's required by law in sandbox games now. But this isn't strictly for the web swinging, as there are also new combat skills for your repertoire, which feel a bit better than some of the other games did as well. I mean, let's face it, the 2000 Spider-Man game's fun and all, but the combat was a bit wonky. Stellar. Marvel's Spider-Man also has a nifty mechanic with a focus gauge that fills up as you deliver blows to enemies, and you can choose to either use whatever you've got to restore a bit of health, or if you wait long enough until the meter turns green, then you can perform a special move that knocks out an enemy instantly. The decision is yours. That won't be all you're doing in the city though. There's plenty of other stuff to keep you on your toes, like challenges provided by the Taskmaster, Harry's research stations to make New York more eco-friendly, those are some of my least favorite ones personally, and a number of side missions to do if you want to break from the story. And just like the Arkham games, completing each of these objectives will earn you experience points to help you level up and use your skill points. I didn't like how the pre-order bonus automatically gave you 5 skill points to spend to your leisure. I felt that was an unnecessary challenge breaker. However, unlike the Arkham games, doing side stuff will also grant you certain tokens that you can use to not only purchase upgrades for Spidey's various gadgets like the impact web and the suspension matrix to lift enemies off the ground, but these are also currency for your suits based on the Spidey universe, where most of them each have a suit power. These suit powers range from high-speed collisions to summoning spirits for assistance, because yeah, that's a thing, to hitting everything in one punch and vice versa that you earn by completing the game 100% and for some reason go streaking around New York. These suit powers aren't restricted to a particular suit, thankfully, they're just available when you purchase a specific one, so afterwards you can pick whichever suit you want and still keep that same power. And while not all the suits are winners, some of them are pretty cool. My favorite ones include the Spider Armor Mark IV, just because I like the glowing eyes and spider logo. The black and red suit you get from Black Cat was a neat reward, and I'm glad I pre-ordered the game just in time for the Iron Spider suit from Avengers Infinity War and the spider arms that you get as a suit power. It was tremendously satisfying hitting goons with these things, and I'm fairly sure it increases the range of my attacks too, so it was a bit easier to hit them. But if I wanted something more traditional, then I could always go with the classic suit, or maybe even the cel-shaded suit, which kinda makes me wish the whole game looked like this. Not that the game looks ugly to begin with, mind you, because it certainly does not. There's a lot of detail put into the character models, and especially New York, and it's very clear that Insomniac took some heavy inspiration from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because they do everything in their power to make it feel like one of those movies. You've got the fancy editing, you've got the mid-credits and post-credits scenes, and you've even got the obligatory Stan Lee cameo. But funnily enough, while some of the music is your basic action movie score, a few of the pieces feel very reminiscent to the Sam Raimi movies, more specifically when you're swinging around, and it fits incredibly well. In fact, the open world itself, in my opinion, is just the right size. After all, it's set in a real location, so it wouldn't make sense for New York to be any bigger. And while the amount of collectibles and objectives can sometimes feel just a little too much, I'm glad that they serve a decent purpose, and thankfully the game slowly introduces more and more stuff as you play and not throw everything at you from the start. Wherever you go, there's always going to be some sort of crime, whether in the streets or investigating secret bases, and unfortunately for some players they're not always optional if you want to just breeze through the story, as certain points will just block the next mission until you do some of that side stuff, but you don't actually have to do that many to carry on, and I'm sure there's at least something that you'll enjoy doing. As can be expected with a huge game like this though, not everything is perfect. The difficulty, for instance, can be a little all over the place. Spider-Man has next to no invincibility frames if he gets hit, so large groups of thugs could drain almost if not all of your health in just a few hits. And it all starts with the first boss fight against the Kingpin. This took me a while to do because of how much Fisk hurts, and it was surprisingly one of the hardest battles in the game. The other bosses were okay, but not outstanding in my opinion, with somewhat the exception of the duo battle between Vulture and Electro, and the final boss felt nice and climactic. Not surprisingly though, one of the less enjoyable segments is when you briefly take control of Mary Jane and Miles Morales. All you need to do is just not get caught and distract the guards whenever possible. They're not awful, they're just not innovative in the slightest, and I guess thankfully they aren't too frequent, but when they do appear they bring the pacing to a screeching halt, and it just kinda further implements how much of a bitch Mary Jane is. The puzzle sections with Peter Parker are a bit better. You've got two different ones where you have to make the electrical circulation flow the right way and with the right amount of voltage, or you have to mix together certain chemicals to match the pictures at the very top. They're pretty easy at the start, but eventually they become more brain-teasing, and I had more fun with them overall than I did with MJ and Miles. They reminded me a lot of the puzzle minigames from the Ratchet and Clank series. Finally, there will be times where you'll have to deal with Spider-Man's greatest foe. Oh, I'm not talking about the Green Goblin or Mysterio or Venom or any of the classic villains. I'm talking about the numerous bugs plastered throughout the game. Everyone who's played this has experienced a bug in some fashion. For me, I had one Sable-based mission that was a real ball kicker and I died multiple times trying to beat it. And then when I got to the last guy, he got stuck in the crates and I couldn't finish the mission. Refusing to give up, however, I had a suit power that created a shockwave and just about reached him, though it took a while to knock him out because I had to keep waiting for the suit power to recharge, but eventually I got him and cleared the base. Aside from that, I've had the game crash on me a couple of times. The last one I remember was while chasing Shocker, and the funniest bug I ever witnessed was after stopping a group of the Demon Gang, and this random woman was just chatting on her phone while standing on the rooftop edge. Miss, you okay? Should I call someone or do you already have that covered? But yeah, other than that, the last thing to mention is the DLC. So far all we can purchase is an episodic story pack that released its first part over a week ago, where you have to deal with Hammerhead and his goons, on top of keeping Black Cat from stealing anything. For around $25 of extra content, you're actually getting a fair bit of substance. The story explores the relationship between Peter and Felicia, and there are some extra collectibles and side missions like the screwball challenges, because she was totes my favorite. I enjoyed what I was given anyway, and I look forward to the continuing chapters within the next couple of months. Spider-Man for the PS4 overall is simply a damn great game. Does it borrow from other sandbox titles? Sometimes. Is it repetitive? Yes, but at no point was I ever bored. Swinging around New York and keeping the momentum going is an absolute blast, thunking baddies has a good amount of oomph to it, and there's plenty of fan service for both lovers of Spider-Man and the Marvel Universe. The most obvious one being able to climb the Avengers Tower, and other Easter eggs like Daredevil's business card, and even a reference to the Spider-Man 2 game with that stupid child that always loses his balloons. I also like the Spider-Man plushie you could find in one of the backpacks, but that's most likely because I have the exact same one. If you have any sort of interest in superheroes or the web slinger as a whole, then definitely play this game. It is on the steep side in terms of price, which admittedly is a huge turnoff, and I understand that this isn't the kind of game for everyone, especially with how common sandbox games are now. But without a doubt, this is one of the best Spider-Man games to come out in a long time. Here's hoping that the sequels are just as fantastic.
And with that, it is now finally time for the last of the Kingdom Hearts reviews. We're basically going to be looking at the entire 2.8 collection. That's including Dream Drop Distance, a fragmentary passage, and a quick glance at the short movie back cover. We don't have long left before Kingdom Hearts 3 comes out, so we better get a move on. I'll see you all next time. Or the 2000 game for the 5th gen, that's the flippin' sequel. Or the 2000, that did it again, I did the sequel again. No, flipping around. Or the 2000 game, how many times am I going to bring up the sequel? Flip it around. Or the 2000 game released for the